One of the things I find when people come into my office for counseling, they're often surprised that when they tell me their deepest, darkest secrets, that I'm not shocked or I'm not repulsed or rejecting of them as other people have been. And I like to tell them, do you think this is the worst thing I've heard? Do you think that you're somehow different or unusual from the rest of us? We all have stories and we all have things that we're not proud of. You're not alone.
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast, Dom Brightmon. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by book number 2 from Dom Brightmon, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. It is the field guide to help unleash the elite performer that is inside of you. Cop it today on Amazon.com or heading over to DomBrightmon.com and snag it in book, ebook, and audiobook, so that way you can take it on the go and get yourself on the go to your northbound success. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as the Going North Podcast, we got another super special, awesome human for you today. That's right, indeed, another super special, awesome human indeed, because you're going to be in for a treat that's good enough to eat 5 times over, because we got a best-selling author in the building, baby. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. And not only is she a best-selling author, she's a keynote speaker aboard. You heard that right, folks. A board certified health psychologist, executive coach, behavioral health, and wellness experts. Let's give it up for the J, E to the H, the one and only Dr. Jodie Eckleberry-Hunt. How you doing today, Dr. J?
I'm doing well. And especially after that great intro, I'm like, wow, that's me.
Yeah, that's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. It's like waking up in the mirror and be like, hello, fabulous, it's me. That's right, indeed. Well, as with all introductions, they're not allowed to be 85.35 years long, and I probably forgot maybe, I don't know, the other 35 years worth of content. So my goodness, am I filling in any cavities I may have missed about you since your first time on the Going North podcast?
Well, I will add, I started to say no, but I will add, I'm also mother of 2 teens. So anybody out there who knows what that's like knows that I'm just a little bit off kilter. And I have lots and lots of empathy for other parents.
Yeah, so that's why you swear a lot. Okay.
Now yes, there may be a correlation. It's gone up a bit.
So I guess you put some weed on the cussing, as some would say.
Oh, I sometimes, what was it Mark Twain said? Sometimes the only medicine that will do is swearing. That's medicine for the soul.
Yeah, it's actually hilarious how that works. It's like, yeah, a lot of folks have made it more popular these days to go in a regular conversation. Is still, yeah, there's always going to be your folks who either like it or dislike it. But hey, after a while, everybody's done it at least once in their lives. Even the folks you think who've never done it, it's like you hear them when they age. And it's like, oh, they actually said superhero in training. They didn't actually say expletive. It's like, oh, they actually have it in them. Like, all right, cool. One of us.
Well, for good or bad, whenever I was in something stressful and I noticed that I was cursing a lot under my breath mostly, I looked into the research, and there's a fair amount of research and growing to suggest that if your family trained you to see that cuss words were taboo or off limits, it kind of gave them a special power in your head. And so whenever you do like curse, when you stub your toe or something happens and you just let it fly, it actually is really good for catharsis, and it's good for your brain. It is actually like a emotional release. So I like to say that actually there's a science of swearing.
Ooh. So is that why you became a psychologist? So you can learn the good ways of why swearing is good for you?
Well, you know what? My son is considering studying psychology, and I told him there is no better field out there because it's endless learning about humans and what works and how the brain works and why we do what we do. And I couldn't have chosen a better field, I guess.
Okay. All right. Cool, cool, cool. So didn't want to be an engineer, didn't want to be one of those wonderful folks out there, a doctor maybe, or something else. But then again, you're a doctor of the mind, I guess.
That is true. But you know what? Math was never of any interest to me. So that kind of ruled out a lot of that. And I just like connecting with people. And my newest book, Badass Stories, it really is a testament to what I love most about what I do. And is I get to listen to authentic stories that I just find so inspiring, even when people have a lot of pain and they're sharing what they've gone through. I'm looking at it through the lens of, and you've survived and you're resilient. And wow, I just think it's really awesome. So, yeah, I'm not a numbers person, I'm a people person.
Me likey. There we go. People are my kind of people.
Yeah, and you're into the inspiration too, the motivational, the inspirational.
Heck yeah, that's right indeed. Got to inspire people, got to motivate people to do their best. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Instead of going for one corny joke, go for 10. That's right indeed. Have 10 corn cobs ready for people.
And yeah, again, there's a whole science behind motivation, and we each have an individual psychology, and what works for one person might not work for another person. There's just, I don't know, incredibly intriguing field.
Heck yeah, intriguing indeed, intriguing indeed. So my goodness, so your most recent book, The Good Old Badass Stories, indeed. That's right indeed. So taking all those stories and or at least a good portion of some stories and putting them all together in a fabulous book. What led to this book in particular? Because you've had a past few books about a good old survival guide for breakup and things like that. So it's like, oh, what led to this one?
Yeah, so this book, well, and my first book, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say the title, so I'll just say Move On.
Yeah, go ahead and say it. You good.
Okay, so my first book was Move On Motherfucker, and it really is about pain and how we get stuck in pain and using lots of tools, including cursing, to propel ourselves past that. And I address a lot of different topics that are common to all of us. My second book, which was Getting to Good Riddance, a no bullshit breakup survival guide, is written because so many people come to me going through a breakup of a friendship, breakup of a romantic relationship, breakup with some kind of BS in their life. And so I found myself saying the same thing over and over and thought I should just put this in a book. It would really help the work that I do with people to do some reading. So that's the second book. It was a utilitarian to make therapy more efficient, I guess. But this book, Badass Stories, Grit, Growth, Hope and Healing in the Shit Show, is probably the book I've always wanted to write, but I was afraid to write. And I tell people that I was afraid to write it because I have some of the same issues that everyone else does. I'm not good enough. No one will like it. What if it's a failure? And I told myself a lot of those things and kept pushing off writing this book. And I wanted to write it for at least 20 years. And I finally sat down to write it. And it was all of, again, the inspirational stories, the things I've learned from people, lessons from my own life. And I found that they coalesced around the themes of grit. So stick to itiveness, never give upness, growth, which is everything, the pain that we all feel as we grow, and hopefully we continue to do as humans. Hope, finding things that keep us propelled forward, like things to look forward to, keep us in the game. We do hope that things will get better. And then healing, all of the growth that we have or the lessons that we have in our lives hopefully will lead to some sort of healing. And it's that healing that allows us to transcend and also being a healing presence with other people. So I guess this book was I guess I could say it was very therapeutic to me to write. And it's an homage to all of the people who, I don't know, granted me the privilege to listen to their stories.
Ah, me like indeed, me like indeed. Because, hey, that's what helps folks to transform indeed, especially when the story's good with all the good old twists and turns. And then you find out you wake up, it's like, oh, it's a fork in the road. Oh, wait, no, the fork was really a spoon. It scooped me back to the same problem.
Mm. Well, life presents us with the same lessons until we learn them.
Ah, so life is a spoon. Okay. Let me stop.
Well, and I forgot, I do need to say this. The other reason that I wrote this book is one of the things I find when people come into my office for counseling. They're often surprised that when they tell me their deepest, darkest secrets, that I'm not shocked or I'm not repulsed or rejecting of them as other people have been. And I like to tell them, do you think this is the worst thing I've heard? Do you think that you're somehow different or unusual from the rest of us? We all have stories and we all have things that we're not proud of. You're not alone. And by writing the book Badass Stories, that was one of my core guiding drivers is I want people to know you're not alone. The things that you face, the struggles that you face are shared in humanity. And so I hope that message also comes across and is inspiring to people.
Ah, there we go, indeed. So, of course, you can always avoid names, but what would you consider probably the worst thing you've ever heard in terms of stories that probably stood apart from the rest?
The most and that's hard because I hear a lot of abuse stories. And there have been times when people have been telling me their stories of being victims that I find it so hard to imagine that I want to say this couldn't possibly be true. Now, I said I find myself wanting to do that, but I stick in it. I don't think that people are lying. It's just listening to many, many cases of people being victimized. It's hard to pick out a story, but to be authentic with you, one of the stories that I tell in the book that is probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to listen to was somebody confessed to me that he had sexually molested a child. And I uh, don't treat sex offenders. And so I didn't know that this was going to be shared with me. Typically, I've treated victims of sexual violence. And so when I heard that story, I was not prepared for it, and it was very difficult for my own issues as a human, and yet having being able to allow somebody to tell their story and not wanting to quickly shut it down even though I was feeling judgmental. I'm a human too.
Yeah, definitely. And plus being a parent too, no less on top of that.
100%. 100%. I think that it's easy to start to think of the therapist as this completely objective person. We try to be, but we're not. We all have our own values and life experiences. Our goal is to try to keep those out of the therapy suite and not put our values and judgments on other people. But we are humans and we make mistakes sometimes too.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like, yep, you think you're on the right path, and it's like, good
Yeah.
old punch of life coming flying at you to destroy your plans, and your papers are flown everywhere, and it's like, oh, I guess this is no longer a house of cards. It's yeah, it's just paper.
Yeah.
But at least
We're
it covered some rock.
we're all in the shit show together, is what I like to say.
Oh yeah, and some of the shit apparently has stilettos. Let me stop.
Mm.
So my goodness, so putting all these stories together was probably the most difficult part of deciding which stories not to put in the books. I'm pretty sure that was a huge challenge considering all the stuff that you've experienced and heard over the years.
Yeah, there were some stories that were so unique that I couldn't put them in the book because it it could identify the person. And so that also was super important to me that I de-identified all of the stories or changed them or combined some so that the folks who had shared things with me would always be protected. And there were some really unique things that I had heard that I would have liked to have shared because I think that there were things that people could have learned from them, but there was no way to present it and still get the lesson across without changing it so much that the point would be lost. And if I told it the way it was, the person would feel exposed.
Ah, I hear you. I hear you indeed. It's like, oh shoot. It's like, oh, this is too unique. Like they'll know it's me.
Yeah, yeah. So, but again, I've been in practice since 2000. I graduated in 2000, and with counseling, they have you do therapy once you graduate school starts. So I've probably been doing counseling of some sort since 1994. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of stories. And so I had to dig deep trying to remember like some of the things that really stood out with me. So that was another challenge. Like I couldn't possibly tell every story. And again, a lot of stories were alike, and I combined them into one story. Because again, all the stories in my book are changed in some respect to protect the person who told me. But I've heard a lot of things.
Interesting indeed. So since '94, so how does technology play in this for you? Has it made things, I guess, worse in ways sometimes for the stories you may have heard? Because with social media and all the ways to connect with the whole darn globe now, it's like, do you think they may have had I guess, added some spice, for lack of a better word, to some of the stuff you were hearing?
Well, and it's interesting you say that. Of course, this goes along with the headlines. The folks who I've seen the most affected by technology are teenagers, and seeing their friends on social media get together but know that they weren't invited, or not really having the life experience or wisdom to know that everything they see isn't accurate, and feeling like they don't measure up and questioning everything about themselves, because the whole task of adolescence is figuring out who am I as my own person, but they just don't have that foundation to sort through the wheat and the chaff, I guess. And so because I have my own teenagers, I've stopped working with teenagers for a little while because it's just too hard to not want to be a parent, I guess, because I have my own teenagers, and I'm not when I have teenagers come into my office, my job is to not be their parent. The other thing about technology that has really taken off since the pandemic struck is folks doing teletherapy. And uh, it, during the lockdown part of the pandemic, I did some teletherapy, some video therapy, and I hated it. And I'm 53 years old, so you can say I'm a curmudgeon, but because I really like to connect with people, I felt disconnected because I wasn't in their physical presence. There was, yeah, I could see them on the video screen, but it just didn't feel the same. I felt a little bit isolated or lonely. And so a lot of people have continued doing teletherapy. And I think for some people that's great. And I think that maybe that provides a service to people who maybe are in more isolated areas. But for me, I will only see people in person because I just don't feel like I'm my best therapist on the video screen.
I hear you. Definitely get it too, because it ain't nothing wrong with being 53, not a fan of the whole digital thing. Because like I'm in my early 30s. Like, shoot, I'm like with text messages, I do freaking horrible. It's like, hey, good luck getting a response from me instantly, unless it's an emergency, among other things too. So yeah, because it's like it's better to be with people because you can feel the energy in a way. It's like like you said, you're at your best when you're with the person in person, not just through a darn screen. And God forbid the internet goes bad on either end. You're like, oh God, no, they're lost forever. No, they're in the middle of a good story, and now we got to bring them back to that point.
Yes, and I don't know if you did any of this, but I also did a webinar via technology, whereas I usually like to talk in front of groups of people. And it went fine, but something huge was missing. Like I just feed off of other people's reactions in the moment. It's just an energy. I've been very, very honest. I have generalized anxiety disorder. And when I talk about generalized anxiety disorder to people, I say that it's like your brain is super sensitive to all kinds of energy, good and bad. You just have to figure out what's going on. But whether it be my age or my generalized anxiety disorder or just my preference, I like to be in person.
No wonder I invited you to be on the show. That's right, indeed. Because a big fan of that, definitely. I was like, yeah, giving a talk online. It's like, oh, the content's gonna be the same, but the experience is definitely gonna be different. Indeed, it's gonna be different. It's like they're getting a penguin as opposed to a polar bear sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think I'm not criticizing people who choose to do something different, but I think the point is just be yourself. Do what works best for you.
There we go. Indeed. So, my goodness. So, what helped you to become fully yourself and realize, you know what, psychology is my jam, and if I was in another lifetime, I'd do the same darn thing.
And that's true. I don't know. My first career was being a medical transcriptionist, typing notes for physicians. And I remember this elderly gentleman, I was typing his note, and he had come in because he was very sad because his wife had died. And so the physician gave him an antidepressant. And I remember thinking, there has to be more. Like, this guy doesn't need an antidepressant. He needs somebody to talk to. He's lonely. He misses his wife. And that stuck with me. At that time, though, I didn't know that I wanted to be a psychologist. No one in my family had been to college. And so I didn't really know that it was for me. And it was just a process of self discovery. So I didn't go to school until later in life. And I thought I was going to be a teacher and took some psychology classes, and it just took. So I don't know. Maybe my point is that we're all on a journey, and at least in my case, what worked is just being open minded enough to go with the feeling at the time and not shutting it down. Like I could have said, I'm too old, or it's too late, or I don't know, I'll never make it as a psychologist. But it's just being able to say, let's just see, and being okay with that.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Let's just see, indeed. That's right, indeed. 'Cause, yeah, so right about that. It's like, oh, I think I'm going to be doing this one thing, and then good old fork in the road comes in again.
Mhm.
And then it stays a fork this time as opposed to a spoon. Then it's like, oh, yay, the journey's going to be a good one. And it's like, oh, here's the real thing. Here's the genuine article, the real leather jacket, not the pleather, not the imposter.
And I tell folks all the time that there are always barriers, and we just don't know where things are going to lead. You just don't know. When you're talking about the fork in the road, you don't know the path less taken, for you at least. You don't know where it's going to lead. There will be struggles, but I do also tell people that through no fault of my own or my family, I had no college fund. I had no money. And it's again just because my family didn't have money. It wasn't because I was somehow done wrong. But if I was going to do it, I had to do it on my own. So there are always things that are scary, like having no money or not knowing what to do. But that's part of what I talk about in the book, having the grit and being ready for the growth.
There you go. Being ready for the growth, indeed. Being ready for the growth. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, so since you've been growing and going on these magical interviews, promoting the great stuff that you're doing to help out your fellow humans on the good old big blue of planet Earth, is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often when you're on these podcasts?
Oh, wow. I wasn't ready for that. How about you ask me the hardest thing I've ever done in life?
So, what was the hardest thing you've done in life?
Be a parent. I say that out of empathy for all the other parents out there. There's no manual. There's no, at the time you're making all of your decisions, you don't know if it's right or wrong. And I tell people, it's because there is no necessarily right or wrong. You're just figuring it out and managing whatever comes about. And often you don't know what the end result will be until years later. So when I said I wish people would ask me that, it's because, again, I want to hammer home people are doing hard work in their lives and the consequences seem so big, but we're all in it together.
Yeah, together indeed. It does take a village.
It does.
That's right, indeed. Especially when it comes to the good old shopkeep. It's like, haha, you can't buy these magical items yet. Go home to your parent. That's right, indeed. Learn from them. That's
Well,
right,
I
and then
think
you'll be able
that
to slay the dragon.
there's such a disconnect in our society. I think we're becoming more and more distant from each other and more judgmental and more divided. And I do think technology contributes to that in terms of social media and how we can create filters and we post our best moments online. And I don't know, I just think it creates a sense of disconnect.
Definitely. Definitely indeed. It's like the darn distraction slabs are built for that purpose to distract us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right indeed. It makes the job of a mom being tougher or just being a parent, period. It's like, oh, let's put you in front of this TV for a second. It's like, oh, here's a tablet. Oh, there's more technology. And as
Well,
they age,
correct.
it's like, oh, crap.
Yeah, and you wonder, like, you see what everybody else is doing, and they're posting on social media that their kids are in soccer and gymnastics and baseball and all of this stuff, and you start to think, well, maybe if a good parent does all those things and I'm not doing all those things, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. And what if my kid doesn't learn this or can't get into this and doesn't know this? And it's endless. It's endless, but you're not alone.
Any advice for those feeling alone out there in the world of parenting, especially single parents, which we got a lot more now?
But true. But I think so. Yeah, I would say there are a lot of on the positive. There are a lot of moms and dads parents groups online. So that is a positive of being online, but just making sure that you get into the right ones. But a lot of communities offer parenting classes. Counseling can just be great to just have a place to check yourself, to talk through things, and in many respects it can be very relieving to hear you're doing a good job, you're doing okay, because you can't always look to your kids to tell you that. They aren't necessarily going to give you accurate information. If there's something they want, they're going to tell you what they want and ask that you get that. But connect to other people who are authentic and not people who are trying to show off to you or who make you feel inadequate.
There you go. There you go, indeed. That's right, indeed. The good old one-upmanship avoided like the plague. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Be like, yeah, I'm the best parent ever. Just look at all this social proof. And comes to find out the social proof is all a veneer.
Mhm. Can be.
That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, a fun question for you. If your fabulous book, Badass Stories, Grit, Growth, Hope, and Healing in the Shit Show, if that book were a food, what would it be and why?
If it were, and you know what's funny is I said when I wanted to write the book, I was inspired by Rachel Naomi Remen's Kitchen Table Wisdom. But I said if it were my book would have to be called Kitchen Island Slop because I would feel like it would be sloppy and messy. So when you say what food it would be, I'm back on that kitchen. It would be some kind of disaster that I was making, trying to make some kind of masterpiece, and I burned it, and we ate it anyway.
So mystery food X.
Yes. Oh, but let me just say, I add on, we ate it anyway, and it was surprisingly good.
So gumbo. Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes you don't really know what you're doing and you figure it out along the way and it turns out okay in the end.
No, I was so hoping you were going to say grits. I'm like, yep, she's going to say
Grits.
grits. Like it's right there.
I didn't. I missed that opportunity.
That's right, indeed. That's right. You can even put sugar in them for some folks that like that, even though we put them on a certain side of the planet.
Mm.
I'm not a fan of sugar and grits.
You're not a fan?
Oh no, not of putting sugar in grits. No.
Mm. Well, it's butter, right? Isn't it butter on grits?
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Butter, salt, goodness. Oh, yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
I
indeed.
don't I lived in Memphis for a year and I don't think I've had grits since then. So it's been a few years.
Ah, you must go back.
I'm gonna be going back for sure.
Ah, there you go. Feed the belly of stuff you may not normally get. That's
Yeah.
right, indeed. That's right, indeed. And then you may wake up as a random snow woman for no reason.
Eventually.
Woo! Well, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive. And that is if you know, wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but you're still in the current year. What advice would you give to yourself?
So I'm 25, but it's the current year.
Yep, you basically wake up tomorrow as a Gen Z parent.
I think that maybe the best advice is it will all work out. You do you. Don't worry so much about what other people are doing and give yourself the grace to make mistakes and figure it out with full knowledge that it will all be okay in the end.
Woohoo! It'll be good in the end. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right. Don't worry. Don't worry
Well,
about the Lincoln Park.
the problem is we just spend too much time judging this is right or this is wrong or this is good or this is bad. And it just is. It's the judgment that gets in the way of growth.
Ah, that's sure too. Because some folks that judge themselves so bad, it's like, oh, let me judge myself so bad out of this situation where I don't even improve at anything.
Hmm. Right. Right. And then you're paralyzed.
Good old analysis paralysis. That's right,
Hmm.
indeed. Been stopping progress since ever. Good old analysis by paralysis. But hey, I know there ain't no analysis by paralysis when it comes to your content. So for those who need to have a whole darn conga line in front of your website and jump on in and keeping up with all the good stuff that you're doing, what's the best way for folks to do so?
Well, it's Jodie Eckleberry-Hunt.com. No hyphens, hard to spell, but that is my website. And you can find all of my books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Turner Bookstore, wherever you buy your books.
That's right, indeed. Turner books, Turner pages.
There you go.
Woo! Well, there you have it, folks. Head over to Dr. Jodie's site. Indeed, we'll put a link to her fabulous site, jodieeckerberryhunt.com, in the show notes of days. That way you can click right on it and then you can dive right on in. That's right, indeed. Go ahead and jump off that diving board and into our website. That's right, indeed. And snag some copies. That's right, indeed. Especially if you don't mind potty mouths. That's right, indeed. But hey, potty.
A
Well,
lot
you
of
all have to
that.
go.
Mhm.
But hey, the good news is we all got to go potty anyway, so it ain't so bad.
You're having a lot of fun with that.
Why? It's my unofficial job.
There you go.
Well, before any more rabbit holes appear, any parting words before we close up shop?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And just reminding you all that we're out there together. So be kind.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.